And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. Indigenous peoples practiced their own forms of government for thousands of years before the arrival of European and other settlers in what today is Canada. Unless they have negotiated self-government, most First Nations are currently governed by the Indian Act. On today's Open Connection, former MLA Skeena Ellis Ross reflects on retirement.
You know, it's the first time in 20 years that I've actually taken a break from public life. I was a counselor in 2003 till 2009 when I kind of took a temporary chair of a chief counselor. Then I became chief counselor from 2011 to 2017. Then I was an MLA up until this past year. So, quite frankly, it gave me a lot of time to sit back and look back on some of the things that I've said and done over the last 20 years. And I find it quite remarkable, the life I've lived up to now.
Kind of look at it and you go, well, could have done this a little bit better. Glad I didn't go as deep as on this one, kind of thing.
Without a doubt. I mean, I'm pretty open about what we did as a council, but I'm also pretty open about the mistakes we made. And there's a lot of them, you know, because we're writing the book on economic development that includes First Nations. We're writing the book on how to implement the Haida court case of 2004. And it wasn't easy. But now I can look back and say exactly that. There's some things in hindsight I would have done differently if I had known what I know now.
Let's look at this honestly. We hear a lot of times, people who may not say it publicly, but that, you know, the Indigenous, they get everything. They get everything for free. And, you know, they have their hands out all the time.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I got empty pockets.
and in reality, if anyone knows, you do, because you were the one, you know, looking at the books and running the programs.
Yeah. And then that saying that First Nations get everything and we always have our hand out is because we get money from government. Well, provincial governments get money from government too. The difference being, though, when First Nations get money from government, it comes with a whole set of rules. You've got to spend this money on this, you got to spend that money on that. And by the way, if you don't do what we say, we're going to punish you. We're not going to give you as much money next time, or we're going to take back the money we gave you. What's so crazy about that setup is that if you do well as a First Nation in terms of managing your money, if you do too well, you come out with a surplus, they punish you. You can't win or lose. So you're always trying to come out with that zero balance. And with the funding agreements that Ottawa has for First Nations, it's a level of responsibility. The lowest form of funding agreement means that you haven't managed your finances well, you're probably bankrupt, you owe a lot of money. And the highest level of funding agreement is, you've done pretty good with your money, we're going to loosen up the rules on you. And we're going to give you more authority over your own funding. But Ottawa's still in charge. So, yeah. There are a lot of people who don't understand the Indian Act and what First Nation leaders have to go through.
And of course, you know, to add to that chaotic mess,
that bureaucratic mess,
is that there's elections again.
Yeah.
By the time you get someone up to speed and, you know, train them, I was like, okay, we're doing good. And all of a sudden, their portfolio is gone and you have to hand it to someone else.
2 years under the Indian Act election, 2 years. And if you're a brand new councillor, it takes you a year to figure out where the bathrooms are, and then another year to figure out what the files are, and then you got to go to election again. And that's why a lot of First Nations couldn't really get ahead. Our custom election for Haisla, what we brought in, the people voted for it, is 4 years staggered. So you have a 4-year term, but every 2 years, the 5 of the councillors go for election, and then 2 years later, the other 5 go for election. So you always have people going on 4-year terms. You always had that continuity. Or that was the theory behind it. And that made a tremendous difference for us.
If we took that same Indian Act model and applied it to business, do you think...
Or even governments. Like provincial government and federal governments, they have 4 years too. It's not staggered. So you get elected. You do a full 4 years or maybe 5 years. So you got 4 years to actually put something in place. Like even for the legislature as an MLA, I had a tough time in the first 6 months to a year just trying to figure out the basics, just trying to figure out where the bathroom is. And very complicated. And everybody told us, yeah, we'll show you the basics, we'll show you the fundamentals, and you'll get it. And the only way to learn it is by doing it. And it was true. By the end of it, I understood what reading a bill was, what debating was. I understood all of that. And I understood what votes were, motions. But that kind of a job, you don't learn it unless you get into it as a staffer or a political, and you live it. And that's valuable experience. I'm still quite honored and privileged to have that experience.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. A mentor is someone who supports, advises, guides, and provides you with the right tools to thrive in your personal or professional life. Often mentors are people who have experience in the current situation or better understand your challenges. Let us return the conversations Ellis shares about one of his mentors.
There was a clerk there, her name was Kate, and she offered to me once, she said, anything you need to know about process, let me know. So I actually drew on her experience for the legislature, for the process. And those clerks in the legislature are really smart. They are really smart. Along with some of the staff for the BC Liberals at the time. We had assistants for the House Leader, for example. I drew on them heavily. We had assistants for the Leader. I drew on them. And of course, my legislative assistants. I drew on them heavily to kind of figure out what was going on. I mean, as an MLA, there's so many people looking out for you. So if you're brand new, they come running into your office and say, you're supposed to be in the building in half an hour, get in there. Okay, what am I supposed to be doing? Here's your speaker, here's the bill, go speak to that. Okay, and you go running off. And so there's a lot of people that did it, but politically I had mentors as well. Andrew Wilkinson was one of the leaders, but before that he was a minister. Mike DeYoung, a really smart guy. And there was a lot of different people had different experiences in different fields. And so every time I came up with an issue, I'd go to a certain MLA and say, hey, what do you think about this? And I'd get that insight. So there's a lot of help around you if you have a party that has experience and has numbers. If you're a party of 2 or 3 or 4 and they're all brand new, you're in trouble.
Did you have an opportunity to help mentor some of those freshmen coming in?
No, not really, because you were talking about the veterans that have been there for like 10 years, 12 years. I was only there like 3 or 4 years, and then we went to re-election. So I guess I was a sophomore. I wasn't a rookie. I wasn't a freshman. But it was interesting to watch all those new MLAs come in and go through the exact same thing that you did. You know, you're debating something and there's one person in the room going, what's going on? Well, that was me. So I really felt for them. And you can see it across the room in all the MLAs. Doesn't matter if you're a BC Liberal or if you're an NDPer. You could tell who the new ones were because you could tell they were kind of nervous. They didn't know quite what was going on. It's natural. It's normal.
Being down there representing Skeena, in essence, you adopted this, I guess, this riding really as your family, right?
Yeah, without a doubt. And it came so natural because as a kid, I lived in Kitimat Village on reserve, still live there today. And our town site for activities and shopping was Kitimat. But when the mall was built in Terrace, we started to come to the Terrace Mall a lot more. We came to Riverboat days a lot more. Plus we had family in Terrace. And when you travel along Skeena, you're going to Kitsillas, Kitsim-Kalem, Niska. I have family and friends in every community. We're all intermarried, along with people in Hartley Bay, which is Gitgat, Pictou, which is Kitasoo, Bella, which is a Witley-Slawwood. We all know each other. So it wasn't hard to get a handle on all the issues facing our native communities as well as facing our non-native communities. It wasn't hard to get a handle on that. And so when I looked at the issues, I understand that because this is where I grew up.
Now that you've kind of retired that MLA hat, Be kind of relaxing, taking it easy, and
Kind of trying to, but once you get into this line of work and you get kind of addicted to it. I've always been a fan of geopolitics, geoenergy, geoeconomics. I've always been a fan of history in terms of wars and conflicts. I've always been a fan of the politics that led up to some of these politics. And so for the last few years, I've been fascinated by what's happening with Russia, Ukraine, Germany, India. Not so much China, because everybody knows China.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
welcome back to Open Connection. There are many ways to judge political leadership: success in what was undertaken, ability to adjust under changing circumstances, maintaining loyalty to those around the leader. Let us return the conversation as Ellis reflects on the recent U.S. election.
When I was looking at what he was saying leading up to that, and what he was saying when he was leading up to becoming the president officially, the one thing I thought about is that he's going to do what he says what he means what he says. And I didn't look for logic in it. I was thinking, okay, we better prepare, because I think he's really going to do it. Of course, I'm in no position to actually say this or do that or decide on anything, but that's what I thought, because I thought that's what his personality is. I mean, when you watch him, it's something different to watch, because he's not a normal politician. He's a businessman. But what kind of a politician, I think the next 4 years is going to tell us. So Canada, we've got to be on our top game.
Well, and you're kind of looking at that. Do you think that we need more of that mix of, business people coming into politics to help kind of say, hey, don't just look at all of just policy. This is actually what works in the real world. Do you think we need more of that kind of?
Well, that was one of the advantages I had as an MLA when I got elected in 2017. We had business people in our party. We had lawyers. We had real estate people. We had people that worked in the social development fields. I mean, we even had a farmer, Ian Payton. Me and him were rookies back in 2017, so we kind of learned together. A native from a small reserve and a farmer coming from Delta. And we're sitting beside each other learning as we're going along. But it was good to have all that experience in one room, because if an issue came up, some person would get up and say, oh, I understand this. So Michael Lee being a lawyer, and Mike DeYoung being a lawyer, Andrew Wilkinson being a lawyer, Andrew Wilkinson being a doctor. It really helps. I wouldn't necessarily say you need more business people, but to be an effective party and to be an effective government, it's a real advantage to have a cross-section of all different walks of life in your party and in government.
We're really kind of regaining our feet when it comes to policy and the economy after COVID, because we basically, COVID hit the restart button on us.
Yeah, big time. And during that time, I was in a leadership race for the BC Liberals. I was touring across BC. And Kitimat, they didn't do as bad as other places around BC. And I tried to point this out. I'd walk into communities and the place would be dormant. There'd be nothing was open. Nobody on the streets. And I'd come back to Kitimat and tell them, we're pretty fortunate. They kept Alcan open. They kept LNG Canada open. So those essential services, you don't have that in every community. So we should feel lucky for that and thankful. But yeah, COVID was that was a strange time. Even Victoria, when I walked to work from my apartment, 20-minute walk through the downtown core to get to the legislature, for so long, I didn't even see a person. I didn't see a car. And the Twilight Zone, those old episodes? The guy walking, last guy left on Earth? That's how it felt. You walk the entire time from your apartment to the legislature, you don't see a single soul. That was quite creepy. That was really creepy. That was a really strange time. I think history will look back on that and they'll try to dissect what was really happening. Not only what happened to our economy, but what happened to us socially and mentally.
What are we looking at? Or what we, I mean, you.
I'm looking at your wall art, your poster art there.
What are we looking at for, coming up here in the future?
Normally I would have said my same old line. I want to look after people. I want to make sure they get good jobs, good education, and they start building their lives. And their kids come to build lives, and our grandkids come to build lives. I'd normally be saying that, but given what's happening now with the United States, I think that there's a real hypersensitivity to what is coming down for Canadians. And I think it's a good wake-up call. Like I used to ask about where's the patriotism for Canada? I don't see it. I've never seen it. But now that the United States, let's not say United States, let's not say what it is. President Trump is talking about Canada becoming the 51st state of the United States, right? And calling our Prime Minister governor. That has really sparked an emotion in Canadians that I have never seen in my lifetime. I've never seen it. And I think this is a real chance to us to reimagine what Canadians are going to be looking at for the next 4, 10, 20, 30 years. And maybe we have to get back to the principles that Canada was founded on in the first place. Freedom, democracy, economy, free enterprise. I think we lost sight of those principles over the last 10 years. So, on one hand, I'm really disappointed at what President Trump's doing. But on the other hand, I'm really proud to see Canadians stepping up and saying, we've got to protect what's Canada.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
On November 14, 2021, a strong atmospheric river made landfall in southwestern BC, bringing 2 days of intense precipitation to the region. The resulting floods and landslides cut Vancouver off entirely to the rest of Canada by road and rail. In this final segment of Open Connection, Ellis shares how Washingtonians help Vancouverites.
Value added, manufacturing. And we always talk about those buzzwords come election time, but this time I think it's an opportunity to say it's part of our nation building exercise. Because you think about where our gas and diesel comes from. Alberta, Burnaby, Prince George, and Washington State. A third. And when the Coquihalla Highway washed out, that took away a third of our gas supply and our diesel supply. So Vancouverites were put on rationing, 30 liters a fill-up. That's what they told them. And I was down in Vancouver when that was happening. So Washington State sent up extra diesel and gas by barge into Vancouver. It showed us how important energy is to us. And I agree, this is an opportunity now to become more self-reliant in terms of energy. When that Coquihalla Highway washed out and the gas and diesel supply got shut down, even Premier Horgan said we should be thinking about manufacturing our own gas and diesel. And that was the first time I ever heard him say something like that. And I agreed, because it's going to cost you billions of dollars to build a new refinery. But what I was thinking, okay, if you're really going down a road, why don't you look at the Burnaby refinery? Why don't you look at Prince George? And make friends with Alberta. How come you keep fighting Alberta? I mean, you're in the same boat in terms of politics. Western Alberta, Western BC, you still get ignored by Ottawa. Why are you not working together? I mean, coming from a small town, I don't see why the provinces don't work, not only for what's happening in the United States, but also how Ottawa treats us. And if we don't take a good look at some of the fundamentals of what keeps our society going, like energy, oil and gas, then at some point we're going to have to pay a bigger price. And I don't want to see that day. You're right, we're rich in resources, but we're also rich in politics that has kept those resources away from the markets for so long, except if you go to the United States, which drives me nuts. I mean, you talk about oil going to the United States. It's the same thing with natural gas. A lot of natural gas goes down that way, which this is not the right way to do things, where you say, no, we will not export oil and gas off the shores of British Columbia. Okay, what about if we sell our oil and gas to the United States at a discount? Well, that's okay.
We don't have the refineries.
Yeah, and we don't have the politics. But I think everyone now is looking at our resources in a different light, given what's happening with the United States. And I've asked the same question because I've been asked in the past, saying, you know, we look at all the First Nations in a given area and how they can't work together, they can't cooperate with each other, neighbors not working with each other. And I pose the same question to the provinces, not just in terms of economics, but say in healthcare. You know, down in the Kootenays and up in Fort St. John, they travel over the provincial border of Alberta all the time for health services. And I didn't understand why the provincial government of British Columbia and Alberta just didn't get together and say, there's got to be a way here to share the cost, because your people keep coming to Alberta for health services. So we got to make it official. It will be a cooperative agreement, but there's so much silo building in our country that it makes it near impossible. And the same goes with gas and diesel. And at some point, we got to say that Alberta is not our enemy. Saskatchewan is not our enemy. We're all the provinces, and I think that's why this is a good opportunity, given what Trump is doing, to say we've got to unite. And that, not just in rhetoric either, not just in a political speech, but really do something that actually helps out the people. And it always goes back to what I think about. I think about from the ground up when I think about policy. Okay, how is this going to affect the average person? If it's not going to affect them, great, fine, I'm on board. If it affects them negatively, no, I can't be quiet. If it puts them in a better spot, like what we did back in Kitimat, okay, great, I'm fully on board. I don't see many legislators thinking like that. I mean, the most I've ever seen in the last couple of weeks where a politician that thought about the person is saying, all British Columbians should buy Canadian. Okay, what about that person that can't afford their bills, or they're $200 away, from being broke or going bankrupt? What about that person? What about that other person that just got laid off because they worked at a forestry mill their entire life, and now they don't have skills to go in to get into another job? What about that person? What about the family of that person? So it's, I think we're in a great time now to rethink what Canada's going to look like in the next 10 years.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.